With week 9 of the college football season now in the books, ladies and gentlemen, we are starting to get down to the nitty gritty as there are teams that find themselves firmly in the college football playoff, while some teams, hopefully looking on the outside, have enough push down the stretch to find themselves in to the college football playoff. Which ones have fallen? Which ones will rise? Only time will tell. All this news and more as the coaching carousel in college football continues on this edition of Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Welcome back, Gabbers. Thank you all so much for joining us here on this edition of Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Of course, you're gabbing with the one and only Mr. CeeLo. And guys, I must tell you, this week was a little unexpected, but in college football, everything is unexpected, right? But there were some expectations that took place, and for the most part, I must say they were actually good ones. But hey, I'm looking at this and I'm just excited. I'm excited to see what's going down. But as always, I gotta go to my boy Brad and see what he had to say. And as we looked at week 9, and as I had in my predictions show, week 9 could spell night-night for some programs. And, for a few, it did. With slim hopes left, I might say. But let's get to the comments and see what my buddy Brad has to say. Again, he says, ND still rocks. I appreciate you. One day you're going to jump on that wagon wholeheartedly and you're going to start wearing that shirt and that hat, since you like to wear hats. He don't act like he cared. Talking Bill B. I don't know. As you saw this weekend, maybe Bill Belichick does care. Indiana gonna take care of business? Absolutely. I forgot to give y'all Brad's picks for last week. And guys, I'm gonna tell you, he was dang near spot on all of his picks except for a handful. So I gotta go ahead and I'm shooting this show. And he probably does not have his picks to me yet. And unfortunately, that's my fault because, needless to say, I did not get the picks in time. And yeah, that's my fault, Brad. So continue to get your picks in here. And if any of y'all want to put your picks in here, please do so. I really appreciate the dialogue and when you guys come and you really put your effort in there to do your best. Because needless to say, this is fun for me. And I know Brad and I started this out, and we really started to have fun with this, and it's really taken off. I'm really sorry about the quality of the last show, you guys, but the lighting for my show has just been really off. I'm trying to get that lighting right, so please bear with me. But as we go into it, I know a lot of you are going to be as though you heard about the coaching carousel that's taken on, but we'll get into that later on. We definitely want to. A lot of you guys are already familiar about what's happened, but let's get into the wild action of week number 9. Let's start with the 55-6 blowout of UCLA, who was riding a three-game winning streak. As this Indiana team looks like a freight train right now. I mean, they really do. Despite the fact that they've really played inferior competition outside of Oregon, they've really looked like a real team to deal with. As Mendoza once again had 168 yards, passing and 3 scores, as UCLA with Aiden Fisher intercepting the first pass of the game by Nico Iamaleava and racing back for a score. And you can't do any better than that. And as a team, Indiana ran for 262 yards on the ground. So while everybody's thinking Indiana's this, we're going to light you up, they don't really know that this running game is equally as impressive as the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame's, though it remains to see how efficient that would be against some top-notch competition. But I'm not knocking Indiana and Kirk Cignetti. These guys are doing what they do. They're going through their schedule, and they're running all the way to the end. But I still think when we get to the show, you guys will see why I'm kind of down on the Big Ten in a sense. But nonetheless, an impressive win by the Hoosiers, who moved to 8-0 and 5-0 in Big Ten play, as the Bruins go back to, I guess you could say, back to where they were beforehand. And yeah. Now, I was going to go into detail about this game, but it kind of aggravated me because, as you know, I took South Carolina in sort of a pick-em with a bunch of guys that I know. And guys, I'm going to tell you something. I don't believe in Cocktober anymore because this was garbage. I'm going to be honest with you. When you had a chance last week to beat a team that was way lesser than this one, and I'm just going to be straight up honest with you. Everybody at South Carolina needs their tails whooped because they did this crap last year. I think was it Ole Miss? Who was it? They got their butts whooped by. Was it Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, whatever? And then they turn around and they try to play. They beat Ole Miss. Now it was Ole Miss they beat, right? Yeah. You turn around and you lay a stinker, and then you turn around and beat a team or come close to beating a team that you ain't even supposed to be in the same building with. I'm still not sold on Lenore Sellers. I was listening to Josh Pate, and I'm going to be honest with you. The Josh Pate, and he was talking about they need to get more help around Lenore Sellers. Look, he ain't going to make a lot of money in the NFL. We said that about Anthony Richardson. Wrong. He ain't that dude. His accuracy is off. And the balls, just you can throw out the drops if you want to. That's fine. But there are balls that he's missing. So I'm not going to even sit here and go there because right now Anthony Richardson is probably going to be unemployed after next season. But with that said, I thought the comeback that the Crimson Tide made was just absolutely insane. But that wasn't the only insane comeback of Saturday. Now, I will say this. Do I think Alabama got away with one? Absolutely. And when you look at this game and you say, okay, they've got LSU next week, I can't even take this seriously. I mean, I really can't take this seriously. They're looking ahead to LSU. Look, I'm going to say it like this. I get it. LSU is basically a wild card right now, given the events that have taken place over the last hours. And needless to say, to me, do I think Alabama's going to have an issue? Possibly, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be very little. But impressive show of poise and staring in the eyes of adversity for the Bama Crimson Tide to come back in this game and really come out and just say, hey, look, we're not going down like that. I am concerned that they're not able to run the football, and then you look back at what South Carolina was able to do with Lenore Sellers in his running game, 18 carries, 67 yards. This is going to hurt the Tide later on if they get to the college football playoff. Everybody's sitting here talking about how good they are. South Carolina's, their defense is not that good. And all you got was 29. Granted, you scored 15 in the fourth quarter, but you're going to have to muster up some kind of a run game, and that's not being talked about. This offensive line for Alabama is suspect at best. And for you to go into Columbia and struggle to put away a 3-4 football team, calls for concern. Calls for concern. I know a lot of people saying, well, they got to win. Okay. I'm not going to say this is going to be an opportunity for them to get better. It is, but in my opinion, this is one you better make sure you pin. Oregon 21, Wisconsin 7. The 2-6 Wisconsin Badgers. And guys, I'm going to say it like this. The Oregon Ducks might better be a little worried, because you're looking at a team that has starting to have a little, I guess, vulnerability to the game. Now, that's not entrusting the fact that Dante Moore left the game with an injury. Although Moore did get dinged, and I think he ended up, I think the thought process is that he was going to have a concussion. No real updates on that, but it wouldn't be surprised me that if it was a minor concussion, and they're saying that it wasn't. But you know how these coaches do things, they like to keep things a secret. 9 of 15 until he left the game, 86 yards, and surprisingly, the Oregon running game had over 203 yards on the ground, but only won this game 21-7 over a Wisconsin team that I'm just looking at and I'm just saying, yeah. Now we understand Wisconsin, they can't, their passing game is just all but non-existent. And really all they had to do was tee off. But then when you look at the total yardage, you look at 335 to 196. Pretty much they almost doubled up what Wisconsin was able to put out. And what really bothered me about this Oregon team was their inability to really finish. And you can't be in a situation where you're trying to play the lesser teams and you're not putting them away. And that's the reality of it. They gave you opportunity after opportunity. The thing is, when a team is consistently attempting to just, in a nutshell, run the ball, that they do something they can't do very well, which is run the ball. That's what Wisconsin is basically attempting to do. That's not a good look. I mean, I get it. You want to do enough with your star quarterback banged up, but ultimately, when you slow the pace down, which was a surprise to me. Normally you see Dan Lanning's team in the Oregon Ducks, they're running over 60, 70 plays. They barely got to 60 plays this week. And, that's also a tribute to how Wisconsin plays. Even though Wisconsin ran 50 plays, you're looking at a football team in Wisconsin whom, despite what the score looked like, was never in this game. But at the same time, I was sitting here thinking to myself, wow, if Wisconsin can just finish some of these drives. I mean, let's look at it. You had one where it was 8 plays, 36 yards. You had one that was 10 plays, 35 yards. And then you had a 12 play, 78-yard drive, which was a score. And that was it. I mean, you look at it. This was Wisconsin's game. And then with the injury to Dante Moore, you look at it and you say, okay, this is trouble for Oregon. But Oregon's defense stood the task, and they understood what the task was, which was to run the clock out. They did so efficiently with a 10-minute time difference between Wisconsin. Now, many of you would say, that's supposed to be the opposite way, because Oregon wants to do its thing. And I totally understand where Oregon was doing. They was trying to push the clock out, but at the same time, this was a game that, if you're an Oregon fan, you're kind of like, why are you letting them hang around? All I can say is that hopefully Dante Moore is not dealing with anything after this win. I haven't heard anything. So, Brad, if you heard anything about Dante Moore, quarterback for Oregon, let me know, buddy. Georgia Tech 41, Syracuse 16, as Haynes King once again putting on that, I call it that bulldog performance, by having 91 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 304 yards, and 3 touchdowns through the air. Sounds like he's getting warmed up for y'all, Brad. Yeah, you can see Syracuse is in a downward spiral since the injury to quarterback transfer Steve Angeli. But, Georgia Tech is just, imposing their will along with Haynes King, whom you guys know, and I'm sure Brad has said this too. This is a guy, in my opinion, that should be talked about the Heisman. I mean, Georgia Tech now is where they're ranked. They were ranked last week at number 7. There's no reason why Haynes King should not be in the talk. I'm dead serious. This is a dude that is quietly doing what Diego Pavia of Vanderbilt is doing, except he's doing it better. I mean, you're scrambling quarterbacks out there. They're not putting up the numbers Haynes King's putting up. This dude is putting up video game numbers. 100 yards rushing, 300 yards passing. What more can you ask for? I'm impressed with Georgia Tech. And yeah, Rambling Wreck. Now, this next game had to have some of the ugliest jerseys I've ever seen. And Oregon has had some doozies. But them mustards, or whatever you call them, Miami Hurricane jerseys, oh my gosh, them things were so... Oh, let's not go there. 9th ranked Miami, 42, Stanford 7. As it looked like for a minute there that Stanford was going to get the better of Miami because it went to halftime and it was tied up at 7. And then all of a sudden the Hurricanes decided that they were going to go Cat 5 on them. You know, there's 5 levels to a hurricane. Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 5, you know. Carson Beck, 21 of 28, 189, 1 touchdown. Mark Fletcher. And guys, we talked about this last week. If Miami can impose their will on the offensive line, you're in trouble. You have to be able to stop their running game. Because we saw Tony Johnson and Malachi Tony combined for 121 yards receiving. And C.J. Daniels only had 3 catches, although he had that touchdown grab. But outside of that, you're looking at a football team in Miami whom you weren't able to throw the ball all over the yard. And given for what happened last week, Miami was not going to allow Carson Beck to throw it all over the field. But you still had 44 carries to 28 passes. And Beck was 21 for 28. And as I said, 189 yards, and he had that touchdown. But Fletcher had 23 carries, 106 yards on the ground, and 3 scores. This is what the winning formula for the Miami Hurricanes is. That you have to continue to pound the football. You cannot be in a situation where you're deciding that you're going to let Carson Beck win the game. You got to get creative and be able to block when you get an opportunity to throw the ball down the field. Because ultimately, I believe Miami's strength is they're running the ball and run off a play action and throw off a play action pass. Ultimately, you got a lot of help from Stanford, which you did not get from Louisville. So, it's fair to throw that in there. You got 2 interceptions, which led to points. And ultimately, Stanford had nothing for your front 7. It was 404 to 144. Just a straight smackdown at the hands of the Hurricanes. I mean, the Stanford Cardinal really never had a shot. It was just... it was the worst thing that could have happened to Stanford coming off a good win, and you were not going to sneak up on this Miami Hurricane team. That wasn't going to happen. So, yeah, tough break for you guys. Very much a tough break for the Stanford Cardinal as they ran into a Cat 5. And the number 14, Texas Tech, continues to be one of the worst enemies of Oklahoma State as they're roll into just getting pounded away on all season. This time they're shut out by Texas Tech, whom hurtfully lost their backup QB in this game in Will Hammond. But Mitch Griffis stepped in, 9 of 13, 172 yards and a score in relief. So, yeah, you can look at this in several different ways. Do I think they can win with him? You can maybe in mop-up duty and maybe keep you in a quarter or two. But they are desperately going to need their leader, Baron Morton, back. They're going to need this kid because ultimately you ain't going to be able to run it up with Dickey the whole time. I mean, that we showed this game. I mean, that was illustrated in this game, you guys. That's not going to happen. So, am I concerned with that injury? Of course I am. Because needless to say, Texas Tech's defense is good, but you're going to have to put up some points. There's some elite running games out there that they're going to struggle with. And this is not a headache that you want to deal with if you're the Texas Tech Red Raiders. As good as this pass rush is, you definitely do not want to have to deal with the headache of dealing with Anzel Nador and Romello Height. You do not want to deal with these guys because ultimately they are a nightmare. Now, surprisingly enough, they only got 1 sack in this game. So That would be a concerning factor as well for the Texas Tech Red Raiders, because they need Baron Morton back. They need this guy. They're going to need him to run the controls on this offense, as despite the score, it still did not look like your typical dominant Texas Tech team that we've used to seeing in 2025. Now, this next game was a game where, Brad, you said you don't think Bill cares. Well, I think he just hushed all of us up with that. Despite the fact that they lost this game, but you saw Belichick and company go for two when they scored and nearly got it. Virginia 17, North Carolina 16. 1 point close of destroying Virginia's dream season and putting the ACC in total chaos. It already is, because these two teams are unbeaten and you got Miami sitting there with one loss. But looking at this team, I got to tell you, this is one of those where you just kind of you check it before you even play it. And you had Gio Lopez, who was 23 of 36, 208 yards, a touchdown, but he had 2 interceptions. And it seemed like the Virginia Cavaliers were giving up some yards on the ground. It seemed like Belichick and company had a different game plan than they've had the remainder of the season. The pace was a little bit faster than what we had seen out of North Carolina, and it seemed to favor the teams a little more. Now the points won't illustrate that, but what you look at is you look at how the offense for the Tar Heels was able to respond. Look, they were 5 of 15 on third down. They had 20 first downs. They were able to outgain Virginia. You heard me. Now, a lot of you will say, well, maybe that's because of the home field. Well, that's possible. But the 3 turnovers are killer. They're absolutely killer, and you cannot have them. How many times do I tell you guys? If you lose that turnover battle 9 times out of 10, you are not going to win the football game. And then you look at the other ones. You say, okay, they outgained them. Check. Then you look at the time of possession. Check. But they lost the turnover battle. It's very difficult to lose the turnover battle, whether you win total yards or total time of possession and still win, because that means you had empty possessions. You cannot have empty possessions and expect to win games. You just cannot do that. I mean, you take a look at the fumble. They had Virginia got a field goal off of the fumble and had missed field goal opportunity right there at the half. How big would that have been? And then you look at the interception in which they were able to bring back for 6. I mean, that is absolutely that can't happen. You just cannot have interceptions like that. That's just a big no-no. And Virginia was very lucky with their turnovers. They were exceptionally lucky with their turnovers. They were just so ill-fated, and just you just don't get any more fortunate than what they got. Now, of course, they did have a turnover in downs at the North Carolina 1, in which they were unable to do anything. And then, of course, you get Virginia to turn it over yet again. And to me, the turnovers dictated this game. But unfortunately, they did not go North Carolina's way. But needless to say, when we look at this game, all I can say, looking at the opportunities that Belichick's team squandered, I don't see a New England team squandering those opportunities. And it just, a lot of people are going to say it's because, they're college players and that's possible. But at the same time, Belichick was a motivator of men that got paid. So what's the difference here? Tar Heels 16, Cavaliers 17, as they win and keep on winning and look to play into the ACC championship game, which that would be crazy considering Miami ain't going to be there. And arguably they're the best team in that conference. That's just how crazy that Louisville loss is and how it is going to hinder them. Tennessee 56, Kentucky 34. As Aguilar had 396 and 3 scores. Brazel had 4 grabs, 138 yards on a score, as Kentucky continues to look for answers. It just hasn't worked out for the Wildcats as Tennessee continues to move back up into the top 20. Memphis pulling off the upset of the weekend, in my opinion. They scored 17 in the fourth quarter when it looked like this game was over with. I had already changed the channel, y'all. I'm not even gonna lie. I thought South Florida had did what they did, but you saw Lewis come out and throw for 307 and 2 scores. Byron Brown did his thing. He had 121 yards on the ground and 2 scores, and it looked like South Florida was gonna pound Memphis into submission, but can't do nothing about them. You can't sleep on them Wildcats, as now they have taken over that spot in the American and given South Florida their first loss in the conference. Now we look at Louisville, who took out Boston College 38-24, as this game seemed like it was in doubt for a little while. I wasn't sure that Boston College was going to be able to do much. As James for Boston College had 244, 3 scores, and Brown had over 200 yards rushing for Louisville. And I think as a team, they were over 300. And BC's got Notre Dame this week. Need I say more? Louisville goes to 6-1 and 3-1 in ACC play. Then we move to number 21 Cincinnati, 41-20 over 500 Baylor, whom looked as there were a couple people that thought Baylor was a team that was going to represent the Big 12.
What a dumbass! Dumb shit! Dumb shit! Dumb shit!
Yeah, I know. Robertson for Baylor had 137 yards and 2 scores. Not the formula that you were looking to have. And needless to say, Cincinnati played up to the potential that I had foreseen them playing all year. They arguably should be unbeaten right now, as Brendan Sorsby had 111 yards passing on 2 touchdowns. But the big story was Baylor's turnovers, 2 fumbles. And you cannot win, I don't care how favored you are. You cannot win if you're turning the football over. And they had 2 big turnovers that, in my opinion, changed the course of this game. You know, when you look at games that get changed, change momentum, you think about that Tennessee-Alabama game. You know, when you get an opportunity for points and then instead points go back the other way. That's not good. And then you look at the time of possession, 35 minutes to 24 minutes, or roughly 25, if you will, you estimate up. But Cincinnati has started to impose its will, running the football, and if they can do that, they're going to be very, very tough to beat in the Big 12. This Big 12 is just wide open, and I'm going to be honest, when I sit here and I listen to people talk about the SEC, the reality of it is, you put anybody in their home building, they'll beat you. You ain't the almighty SEC. Y'all are pretty much even keel now. Okay? Let's stop this nonsense. But Cincinnati 41, Baylor 20. And arguably an upset that I was listening to Josh Pate say this as well. Washington 42, Illinois 25. I myself chose Illinois. I'm not even going to joke with you. I thought Illinois was going to go into the Husky Stadium and they were just going to put their thing down. And this is my mistake because, needless to say, I know how strong Washington can be in Seattle. And I just totally neglected that when I chose it. Williams had 280 yards, 4 touchdowns passing. Boston had 153 yards on 10 grabs and a score. And this Washington team is looking like a team that may not make the playoff this year, but they're going to be a strong contender possibly next year if they can bring back everything. Arizona State falls to 5-3 at home as Houston walks into Tempe and put the upset smackdown on the Bulls. As Sean Levitt's return was all for naught. He threw for 270 and a score. Connor Wigman ran for 111 yards and 2 scores. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and say, these scrambling quarterbacks, I don't care how good your defense is. If you cannot slow them down, you're going to catch it. And I'm giving a public announcement to all you top defensive teams. You better learn how to stop these scrambling quarterbacks or they're going to put a hurting on you. I don't care how good your guys are disciplined. There is no antidote for a scrambling quarterback. And Wigman did his thing, and it burned It burned Arizona State as Arizona State attempted to make a comeback. They scored 16 in the fourth quarter after being down 24-0, but it wasn't meant to be. Number 25, Michigan 31, Michigan State 20, as Sparty is just continuously attempting to try to figure out what they can do to fix its problems. Just offensively, they just cannot get it done. And even when you look at this Wolverines offense, Underwood threw for 86 yards and you still gave up 31 points. But that's because you gave up 276 yards on the ground and 4 scores. You can't expect to win if you can't stop the run any better than that. That's just unacceptable. Yeah. I mean, that's just all there is. When a team can throw for 86 yards and run for 276,
run.
Next, let us get into the big matchups of the week. Starting with that number 11 undefeated BYU Cougars team 41 over the home team Iowa State Cyclones 27. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this because many people, like myself did, I doubted them because Iowa State's a good team at home. And I thought Rocco Beck was going to lead these guys to victory, but unfortunately he was 24 of 36, 311, 1 score, 3 interceptions. Now, one thing I got to say about this BYU pass rush, it's for real. I'm going to be honest with you. They get after it hard. They combined for 4 sacks, but they were constantly pressuring Rocco Beck. I mean, it was a constant, it seemed like an avalanche. These guys don't play around with their pass rush. They definitely get after it, and they get you. And if you're not ready for it, you'll be looking like Rocco Beck. The yards look good, but the interceptions,
Damn you! Bruh.
And I didn't actually watch the whole game. I just got to a point where I was like, okay, yeah, Iowa State's about to put that thing on them. And all of a sudden, you saw BYU score 6 right after Iowa State. It looked like Iowa State was going to break this thing open. And it was a great 2-minute offense. Great. So, we always talk about the middle eights. So you look at BYU, they were not only able to take advantage of the middle eights, but they were able to get 10 points and neutralize all the momentum that they had. So you go from being down 24-10 at the half to being down 24-20 within a matter of 4.5 minutes in the third quarter. And then you force a punt. And after that, the momentum just seemed to be going down and down and down. And it just continuously went downhill. And you cannot afford to, especially if you're in your building, you cannot afford to do that and then throw a pick six. That's just a big no-no. When you do that in your building, you suck the life out of a building. And it's kind of like that effect they said about LSU. But nonetheless, when you watch how this Iowa State team has responded, not responded, and then you go to BYU and how they've continued to respond to adversity, they understand they're going to get everybody's shot in this conference because ultimately they're undefeated. They're going to get everybody's big shot because, needless to say, until somebody knocks off the bed bag wolf, that's where it's at. And I don't see too many more opportunities unless Cincinnati's going to do it in their building. And this is going to be a fun matchup in a couple of weeks. I can't wait to see it. But BYU 41, Iowa State 27, as the Cougars just continue to win. Bear Bachmeier was 22 of 35, 307, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also added 49 yards on the ground and a score. Now, I will say this. Do I think it's very important that Bachmeier stay healthy? Absolutely, because if he gets hurt, BYU goes how he goes. Parker Kingston, 7 grabs, 133. Chase Roberts, 8 for 128. I think the one thing that's deceiving me about this BYU team, they're able to throw the football. Now, granted, Iowa State has been ravaged with injuries in their secondary and on their offense. So in fairness, this is not the big show guns of the Iowa State Cyclones. So ultimately, get their best shot, but hey, attrition happens to everybody. And in perhaps the most craziest wild game ever, I was listening to Josh Pate on his podcast, and he said something about they were just heckling Texas.
Dumb shit! Dumb shit!
After they did what they did in the third quarter. And I think it was the fourth quarter. They got down 17 points, and then all of a sudden, this got crazy. Because I remember I turned it off. I'm not even going to lie to you. When they scored that touchdown, I looked at it. I said, this game over with, bro. This game over with. I told my wife, let's go to the stove. And I had, I don't remember what game it was I had in my ear. I had another game in my ear. I can't remember what it was, but I had it in my ear, and I'm sitting there listening to this game. And then they did, like the highlight, where they do the update. And I heard Texas, I think it was the Alabama game I was watching. And they were just talking about how, they made a comeback. The Texas Longhorns are, and said, don't look now. Here come the Longhorns. I'm like, what? And there it was. And I think it was so funny how we hear teams all the time say, just run the ball, get out of here with a win. Well, you look at Mississippi State was able to score a touchdown right there at the end. And in the third, technically it's third at the end of the third. But when you look at it from the standpoint of, okay, Texas has got to get some work done. You're up 31-14 at the end of 3. Normally you just sitting there waiting, oh Lord, let me just look and see who's going to be the GOAT of this games. But then within 2 minutes, the Longhorns go 80 yards down the field. And who did they keep hitting? My man Parker Livingston. I don't understand why this brother does not get the darn ball more. But he did have a 62-yarder by Wingo. And yeah, I mean, let's do the math. Sark does his best work when the pressure's on. But here's the other thing. It wasn't just the fact that it was 31-14 going into the fourth. After Texas scored that touchdown, they went 75 yards and made it 38-21. Then 3 minutes later, it's 10 again. Then in 2 minutes, you get a punt. Then in 3 minutes and 30 seconds, Texas kicks that long field goal. That's that wild card. I don't understand. And then you kick the ball to Ryan Niblett. And he brings it back 79 for the score to tie the game.
You fucking idiot.
It's official. You suck.
Then not only do they tie the game, but you get a $144 to win this game. All I'm going to say about that is teams like Mississippi State find ways to lose games. And here we are early in the year. Yeah, Mississippi State might be for real.
What the
Stupid.
I did not.
It's not funny, Ed.
No.
Hey,
They
shut
are
up!
not. And ultimately, Arch Manning had to leave this game with a concussion. He ended up with 346, 3 scores, and an interception. Blake Sharpen had 381 and 4. But ultimately, this is one of those games where you attempt to run the clock out, and I don't even know how to ascribe this game. I mean, everything was even. Turnovers, time of possession by 2 seconds, passing the ball. Everything was even, other than the exception of nothing. You didn't finish the game, Mississippi State, and you had home field. So, needless to say, any even statistic-wise should favor you, not Texas, because you have home field. You went conservative too soon. Yeah. Well, the Texas Longhorns go to 6-2, 3-1 in SEC play, and the Mississippi State Bulldogs, once again, still winless in the SEC, go to 4-4. Now we look at a game which I knew this was. I mean, I'm surprised this game was even closer than it was, because to me, I look at this Ole Miss team and I say to myself, now why y'all let them hang around like that? You know what I'm saying? They gave you a turnover, and you couldn't put them away. They talking about they scored the final 9 points of the game. So, look, I watched this game, and it almost looked like Ole Miss was attempting to give this game away. That's what it looked like to me. It looked like they were trying to get a damn thing away. I'm just saying. I mean, anybody else thought that? Look at that. Ole Miss 35-36 to 24-24. Watkins, 111 yards receiving. Lacey looked pretty good, 78 yards rushing. But here's the thing. This is going to be the death bell for Ole Miss. Watch. They can't stop the run worth a dime. They cannot. They actually did a better job in the Georgia game than they did here. And yeah, this is going to hurt them later on. Because Oklahoma ran the ball for 136 yards, and I get it. There were 2 chunk plays. I get it. But you cannot miss tackles in the open field or miss guys at the point of attack and allow them to scoot free. Because they had 2 touchdowns on, yeah. So arguably, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, wow. Yeah. Overall, it was a decent game. I still think, like I said, Trinidad Chambliss is a good quarterback, but he got a lot to do. 20 incompletions in this game for 315. Yeah. But as I said, the carnage ensues in the Southeastern Conference, as these aren't even the best teams in the conference. And I was listening to somebody say, I don't think there's a clear-cut favorite in the SEC. Oh, there is. And I'm about to talk about them now. They just got another coach fired. Oops. Well, they got their first one fired. Let me get that right. Well, you could say they got him fired too, Texas A&M 49, LSU 25. Ain't nobody counting that jump touchdown they got in the fourth quarter. A&M was basically trying to get out of there, you know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of people talking about his halftime speech and this, that, and the other. Listen, they ain't, no. Let's not do that. Let us not do that, because ultimately this is a football team that is putting their foot down, and they are just absolutely running away with the SEC. I don't see anybody in this conference that can beat them when they're on their game. This game would. Now, I will say this. They better be careful, because they're off for a week. They're going to hear a lot of noise coming up, and I honestly think A&M better check themselves, because, and this is no knock on A&M, because needless to say, Missouri is in desperation mode. They still haven't got their marquee win. This would be absolutely big for them if they could get this victory over Texas A&M and attempt to push their way back into this. But I'm just saying, you as A&M need to stay unbeaten to get a crack at the SEC title. That's what you want. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you don't want to get in there and play another game. A&M would love nothing to do this under Mike Elko. And this is where I see this football team going. This football team is very good on both sides. And this is despite losing Moss, who, in my opinion, is their best back. But I looked at Marcel Reed, and look, you can say what you want about him. I did not like the fact that he ran the ball a lot. But looking at their schedule, all they got is Missouri and Texas left. Now, granted, they got to go to Austin. But I'm going to tell you something. If that crowd in LSU at night couldn't get to you, and this game should have been uglier. Anybody watch that game like I did? I kept sitting there. I told my son, I said, this game finna get ugly. And Brian Kelly over there yelling at his special teams coordinator because they kicked the ball to arguably one of the most underrated players in the country in KC Concepcion. I love Malachi Lemon. I love Jeremiah Smith. I love Ryan Williams. But that KC Concepcion, good luck trying to cover him and that Craver kid. Y'all gonna catch it trying to catch these. See, Mario Craver only had 4 grabs for 42 yards. KC Concepcion, 3 grabs, 45 yards, and a touchdown. These are pedestrian numbers, but then look at this right here. I want y'all to look at something. Have y'all ever seen an LSU team give up 224 yards on the ground? Now, granted, 108 were by Marcel Reed and 2 scores, and he had that 41-yarder early in the first half that kind of just, it didn't rip their heart out, but it was kind of like, you remember Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? He was kind of able to get that hand in there. That's what it was. They were able to get their hand in there. And after that return by Concepcion, pulled that Kano on him. You know, Kano, Mortal Kombat.
What a dumbass!
Worth a try. But guys, this was the game that many of you know, and I'm sure you've been following, that right after Brian Kelly was relieved of his duties as LSU coach, as well as the offensive coordinator who was let go Monday. To me, this was a situation where LSU felt like, this is what I think. I believe LSU felt as though there were a lot of jobs out there that were either already available or there were going to be more that were going to become available. And they did not want to compete with that. They wanted to go ahead and get the jump on their guy. Now, I've heard rumors they want Marcus Freeman, my guy.
Bruh.
Come here, LSU. Keep dreaming. You got one, you ain't getting this one. Now, there's a lot of names out there that I've heard. I mean, Kurt Sinetik's gotten his big deal. And you possibly even can look at a couple of guys up north for this job. I mean, there's been talks that Lane Kiffin could be going to Florida. I mean, heck, look, I'm going to say it like this. Why would you want to go to Florida when you could go to LSU? You turned Oxford into a place, destination now. What could you do if you had Baton Rouge? But I did agree with Josh Pate said on his show. He said that it's a culture at LSU. You got to be a part of the culture. And I totally agree. I don't even like LSU like that. But college football is grander when you have LSU competitive and out there doing its thing. And the way things are right now, it's not what you want. You don't want to see LSU in a situation where they're not balling out. You got to have that for college football. And I think ultimately they're going to have to take their time, take this search and make it something great. Because you had 4 years of Kelly. See, now your Orgeron replacement is looking even worse. Relieving Orgeron of his duties makes little sense now. The same with Les Miles. Just telling you, you don't miss your water till your well runs dry. And my mouth is dry, so it's about that time, y'all. Make sure y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments. Brad, I hope you're doing good, buddy. Appreciate all the insight that you give, brother. And as well as you, too. Please make your name known so I can give you a gab out on the show. I don't want to just keep gabbing out, Brad. Make sure you leave your comments down below, as well as if you're a first-time subber, make sure you hit your name down there, too, so I can give you a big gab out on the show. Also, go to my Facebook page and the Facebook group at Gridiron Gab Triple Option. Make sure you add and join. Finally, go to my Instagram at Mr. CeeLo so you can catch up with all the shenanigans during the season. But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.